Welcome back to When Harry Met Board Games, where we feed our people with relatable content and our victory condition is your satisfaction. I'm Harry, and before we go any further, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click on that bell notification. That way, when we are doing our thing, YouTube lets you know. Today, we have another top 10 list, or I should say, a top 15 list for you all, and I'm very excited because we're going to do something we normally don't do here When Harry Met Board Games, and it's discuss upcoming games because it's my top 15 most anticipated board game releases of 2021. So let's get straight to it with my number 15. And the reason it's number 15 is because I have not played its predecessor. It's the sequel to a very popular game. And second of all, because it's possible that this game may not actually be released in 2021. It might actually be postponed all the way to 2022. But for now, it's my number 15, and that is the 7th Citadel. And this is Ludovic Roudy's sequel to the ever so popular 7th Continent, or the 7th Continent. And this game is an exploration game with lots of immersive gameplay experience and exploration, and hundreds, if not thousands of hours of content all packed into one box. Now, one of the complaints that the predecessor 7th Continent had from many people was that there was not enough interaction with that world. And it appears that this will address that issue, as one of the emphasis in the description of this game is that there's lots of interaction with the world that you are exploring as you go by. So it seems very exciting, very interesting, especially for those who like cooperative or solo play. The 7th Citadel. Now, my number 14 most anticipated board game of 2021 is Whale Riders. And this is a game, the designer is Reiner Knizia, and it's going to be published by Grail Games. Now, one of the very exciting things about this game is that the artwork will be done by Vincent Dutrait, and Vincent Dutrait works a lot with Grail Games, so I think this is a great partnership, Reiner Knizia and Vincent Dutrait and his beautiful artwork. Now, one of the reasons why I'm excited about this game is because it's a race-themed game. There's a racing element to the game. I like race-themed games. Also, it's a contract fulfillment game. There's some sort of orders or contracts that players are acquiring throughout the game and trying to fulfill. There's even a market and some card play with some neat hand management. Now, I like the fact that this game is described to be a classic of a game in modern times, right? Because this is a modern day release, but it has a classic feel to it. Also, it's described as having very simple rules to learn, but it appears that there's some depth and some weight to this game, as the people who have played it so far have given it a pretty high grade as far as weight is concerned, at least for your typical Reiner Knizia games. My number 14 game I'm most anticipating for 2021, Whale Riders. And now we move on to my number 13. And my number 13 is Batman: The Dark Knight Returns. And this is a production by Cryptozoic Games, who has the IP for Batman and DC Comics. And this is based on the popular graphic novel, Frank Miller's popular graphic novel from the 1980s, titled the same way, Batman: The Dark Knight Returns. And what's interesting about this game is the two designers are involved in it. First of all, you have Daryl Andrews of Sagrada fame. I like Sagrada, dice drafting, abstracted game, beautiful components. And also Morgan Dontanville, who is a former DC Comics editor. So these two have paired together to work on this game. I don't know too much about the mechanisms, and if I did, this game would probably have ranked higher on my list. But even so, I do know that this is a solitaire only game. This is a solo game, guys, and it's really, really cool because I have not purchased a solitaire only game since I bought Friday many years ago by designer Freedom and Freeze. So I'm very much intrigued about this solitaire type game with a Batman theme. There's a bunch of one-off missions that you can play, but you could also combine them all to make an epic campaign style of game where previous games and their outcomes affect future games. Really, really neat. My number 13 most anticipated board game for 2021, Batman: The Dark Knight Returns. Now we move on to my number 12. And my number 12 is a game called Lawyer Up. And this has, again, we have a duo of designers. We have Mike Nade, who has designed several games in the past, none that I've played, and Samuel Bailey, who is the co-designer of this game and has helped in the development of many games. He hasn't officially designed the game before, but he has that experience developing games, and this is his first venture into co-design. So this is going to be published by Rock Manor Games. This is a 2-player only card game with a litigation or a legal theme. It's asymmetric, where one player takes on the side of the prosecution and the other player takes on the side of the defense. You have multiple cases in this game, different types of cases, murder and all these other different types of cases. So you have some variability from the box, right? There's some set collection, some pattern building, which I guess is to reflect the idea of the collection of evidence, the presentation of said evidence. And there's also this area majority, area control thing where you're vying for influence among the jury as you're trying to steer them in your direction and convince them so that they ultimately vote in your favor as far as it's concerned. So really, really cool. There's not too many legal or lawyer themed games out there, so I find that to be unique, refreshing, and again, 2-player only, tactical type asymmetric card game. Sounds very intriguing to me. My number 12 board game that I'm most anticipating for 2021, Lawyer Up. My number 11 most anticipated board game for 2021 is Trinidad, designed by Michele Cuandam, and this is a game based in 16th century Spanish colonial times in South America. This is a city building game with worker placement, and you have different types of workers that do different kind of things. I find that to be neat, and it adds another wrinkle of choice and decision making as far as the game is concerned. There's also some tile placement, area majority, variable player powers, and get this, there is voting. There's even a political element to this game, which I find to be very intriguing. Now, there's something about a board game that's based on a actual geographical location and is titled thus that always catches my attention. Games like Puerto Rico and Cuba, Jamaica, right? Things like this always catch my attention. So this game is called Trinidad, and it's definitely caught my attention enough to make it to number 11 in my most anticipated board games of 2021 list. Now we move on to the top 10. My number 10 most anticipated board game for 2021 is Adventures in Neverland. And this is by a trio of designers, 2 of which have worked together previously in one design called Revenge of the Dictators. And the third designer, this is her first board game design. This is published by Two Tomatoes Games. And basically this game consists of a map, I guess, that you're exploring. You're moving through this map. There is some dice rolling and, of course, some variable player powers. Now, what's interesting about this game is that this is a story-driven game, kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure game, where there's a bunch of cards that you interact with narrative text, and some decision-making. There are lots of opportunities for the players who are playing to interact with one another. There's some non-player characters, NPCs out there that you'll also interact with, and sometimes have some type of encounter that I guess leads to some kind of decision, and you await its outcome. Again, I have not played it. I don't know too much of it. This is based on the description I've read. But first of all, we've got Peter Pan, which I was a big Peter Pan fan growing up till this day. I still want to be a kid. So yes, Peter Pan is a really cool IP. And again, the story-driven, choose-your-own-adventure kind of aspect of this game sounds very intriguing to me. My number 10 most anticipated board game of 2021, Adventures in Neverland. And now we move on to my number 9. And my number 9 is called the Transcontinental. And this is by designer Glenn Dresser, I apologize. And I believe this is his first board game design. This is by Wheelhouse Games. And this is a train-themed game. Train-themed games always have a little bit of a head start. You know, as far as I'm concerned, they always intrigue and appeal to me. This is also a worker placement and pickup delivery game where players are manipulating a shared train, right? So there's no idea of everybody has their individual trains that they're utilizing for their pickup and delivery. There is a shared train. So I like this concept of a shared means of transportation in order to carry out this pickup and delivery that you have to do throughout the game. You're building railways, trying to connect. This is based in 19th century Canada. And there's some ally cards that you recruit, some card drafting you do throughout the game that give you special abilities, advantages and benefits over the other players. And it's cool because all of these ally cards are based on actual historical figures in Canadian history. So again, very exciting. My number 9 most anticipated board game of 2021, the Transcontinental. Now we move on to my number 8 most anticipated board game of 2021, and that is called Paper Dungeons, a dungeon scrawler. This is a roll and write dungeon crawler. I don't even need to say any more. The designer is Leandro Pires, and this is by Meeple BR Games. This is such a cool idea. First of all, it has a capacity for 1 to 8 players. This is non-co-op though. This is a fully competitive game that I'm aware of at least. So it grants you a lot of opportunities, and usually roll and write games can have that scope of having larger player counts because as long as you have enough pen and pads for everybody, booyah, you're done. But it's such a cool idea because, first of all, I'm a big fan of your typical fantasy themed dungeon crawlers. And then you combine that with a roll and write game, which I'm a pretty big fan of roll and writes as well. I appreciate them. I think that's such a neat, innovative idea. I have not seen that yet as far as the hobby or the industry is concerned. There's a bunch of different classes in this game. Players have the opportunities to level up by utilizing their dice, lots of dice rolling and selecting of dice that dictates where players and go with their characters as far as upgrades and level ups is concerned. Really cool. My number 8 most anticipated board game of 2021, Paper Dungeons. My number 7 most anticipated board game of 2021 is Ankh, Gods of Egypt, designed by Eric Lang and published by Command Games. And one of the reasons why I'm very excited about this game is because this is Eric Lang's 3rd game in what is his magnus opus of a trilogy, starting with Blood Rage, Rising Sun, and culminating now with Ankh, Gods of Egypt. Another reason why I am excited about this game is the Egyptian theme. While the Nordic theme is interesting and the Japanese theme very much so, I'm even more captivated by the idea of the Egyptian theme, and in particular, the Egyptian mythology. And it seems like this game takes the approach or the perspective of players actually being gods themselves, the Egyptian pantheon, so to speak. This game has beautiful miniatures, as is customary from Command Games, and it involves non-randomized combat. Cool, really excited. My number 7 most anticipated board game of 2021, Ankh, Gods of Egypt. And now my number 6 board game, most anticipated board game of 2021, is called Feiyum, or Feiyum. Don't know how to pronounce it. I believe it's the German word for pharaoh, and it's designed by Friedemann Friese. And this is another Egyptian-themed game. So we have back-to-back Egyptian-themed games. That's something that really piques my interest, catches my curiosity. This is a game where players take on the role of Pharaoh's advisors, preparing for the prosperity and development of civilization in Egypt. Now, this is described as a planning game, and a game that those who like planning games will enjoy. And I very much fall in that category. I love games where from the very get-go, from the beginning, you're mapping out long-term strategies in order to carry them out, execute, and optimize your decisions throughout the game. And this game seems to involve all these things. Now, first of all, the mechanisms it includes deck building. I am a huge deck building fan. Route building, which I am a big route building fan. Worker placement, another mechanism I love and adore. There is a market, and it has solo play or rules for solitaire play, which some of Friedemann Friese's designs have not had those rules in place previously. So this game, straight off from the box, you have official solo variant. So I am very much excited about my number 6 most anticipated board game of 2021, Feiyum. And now we move on to my number 5. And my number 5 most anticipated board game of 2021 is called Dead Reckoning, designed by John Clare of Mystic Veil, and space-based Feiyum, and it is published by AEG Games. So you got a designer who's made some noise in the industry, you've got a publisher that's also made some noise, and they're working together to bring about this pirate-themed nautical-themed game, where players are all taking on the role of pirates trying to pillage and plunder and take over as much as possible and gather as much treasure and booty as possible. This game involves area majority. A really neat thing is it brings back the cube tower attacking mechanism. I don't know how it's executed, but games like Shogun and Wallenstein have brought that into popularity, the idea of conducting combat through the use of these cube towers. So that sounds really cool, really neat. This game involves some exploration. So this does have a little bit of a 4X type of feel to it as you're exploring, exploiting, and exterminating and all this kind of stuff. Now the neatest, coolest twist to this game is the fact that John Clare is bringing back, as he's done in other games, Edge of Darkness included, and Mystic Veil, his card crafting deck building mechanism, where you're not necessarily building a deck by acquiring different cards and making your deck thicker and filling it up with really powerful cards. Instead, you are sliding cards into these sleeves that add additional text and powers and benefits to your cards, so that as the game progresses, you're creating some really massively powerful cards, right? So I think that idea is really neat. It's kind of John Clare's claim to fame, and he's incorporating it in what's already seems to be a very interesting thematic game, Dead Reckoning. And now we move on to my number 4 most anticipated board game of 2021, and it is Tiny Epic Pirates. I'm a big fan of the Tiny Epic series. They work for me, and I love the concept, the gimmick behind it of, you know, taking these very small components and packing them all into this small presentation, this small package. But you open it up and it packs a punch. It's a meaty, substantial gaming experience by designer Scott Alms and published by Gameland Games. Now, the interesting thing about this game is, first of all, it's pirate themed. So we had back-to-back Egyptian themed games, and now we have back-to-back pirate themed games, so you guys can get an idea of the kind of themes that appeal to me. But this game includes a rondel mechanism, and what's really cool is that each player has their own asymmetric rondel with a different configuration of the different possible actions that you can take. I'm sure there's a lot of overlap, perhaps all of the actions overlap, but the order in which they show up in that rondel differs from one player to another. I think that's really neat. This is a pirate game that not only involves typical attacking and pillaging and plundering for treasure and booty, but it also involves trading. That seems neat. I would like to see how these disloyal, distrustful pirates can interact with each other and get on the same page long enough to pull out any trades. That idea really, really intrigues me. Also, there's some pickup and delivery. I guess this is the acquisition of treasure and eventually burying it, which is one of the end game triggers, or I believe it is the main end game trigger. When one player buries 3 treasure away, I think that triggers the end of the game. Really, really cool, really neat theme. Scott Alms, for the most part, has not let me down. My number 4 most anticipated board game of 2021, Tiny Epic Pirates. My number 3 most anticipated board game of 2021 is Adventures in Robin Hood, designed by Michael Menzel and published by Cosmos Games. And one of the reasons of many that I'm excited about this game is because the last time that Michael Menzel designed a game and worked in conjunction with Cosmos Games, he put out Legends of Andor, which is a very successful, popular, well-received and enjoyed game within the industry. And it's a game that actually put out many expansions and sequels to it, and even spin-offs from other designers, including a children's version of the game. So now he's putting his name back in the hat, and he's giving us another chance at designing, and he's doing it together with Cosmos Games. And Michael Menzel, for those who don't know, is already very renowned and popular in this industry for being an artist. In particular, he does some of the most beautiful boards out there today. And of course, he's doing the artwork for this game as well. This is a cooperative game, just like Legends of Andor was. And the board, as the description says, is ever changing. It evolves as you're making all these different decisions that will change it. It describes this game as being easy setup and takedown, which is always a bonus. And what's interesting is that this is a story-driven game, almost like a choose-your-own-adventure game, where the narrative and the interaction that players will have with the story and the choice and decision-making will be based not on cards, but on a hardcover book. So this is really, really exciting. Now, I forgot to mention, of course, this is a Robin Hood themed game. So that, again, sounds very, very exciting to me. That's always an interesting intellectual property to explore as far as I'm concerned, which is why this is my number 3 most anticipated board game of 2021, The Adventures of Robin Hood. Now, we move on to my number 2 most anticipated board game design of 2021. And it is Descent, Legends of the Dark. And I am a big Descent fan. I never played the first edition, but I own the second edition. I own pretty much everything that's out there for the second edition. And for many, many years, Descent has been the standard bearer, the benchmark within the industry for dungeon crawlers. Now, of course, games like Gloomhaven have come and have taken over and rocketed to number 1 on BGG's rankings. But Descent still remains a very heartwarming, beloved game by many people who have been in the hobby long enough to have played it. Now, this Descent Legends in the Dark is the 3rd edition, and it's from completely new designers as far as those games are concerned. We have Nathan Hajek, who has produced or published a couple games, designed a couple games. He designed Fallout, and he was involved in the design of, he was one of the designers in Lord of the Rings, Journeys in Middle-earth. So he has worked on some games. And his co-designer, Kara Centel-Dunk, has worked a lot in the development of other games, although this is his first credited design. Now, this is a fully cooperative adaptation of Descent. Previous versions of Descent were a one versus all, where one player controlled the overlord or the mastermind, the bad guys, and a group of players controlled the heroes, the good guys. Now, all the players will band together as a group of heroes to play against the overlord, which will be controlled by an app. This is an app-driven game, which is something that's raising a lot of alarm as far as some of the old fans of Descent are concerned, who preferred the one versus all format. I am open-minded to this. It's intriguing and interesting to see how they carry it out. Yes, some people don't want to know about app-driven games because what happens when the game goes out of print and that app, for whatever reason, is no longer available? How can you play the game? I don't know. The question is, can you get your money's worth between now and then? And when will that ever happen? Now, this game also includes 3D terrain features, which I think is really cool. So when you set up these different scenarios, you're going to have multiple levels within that one particular scenario or encounter. I think that's really neat, and it's going to add a lot of table presence to these games and definitely add to the eye candy appeal that games like this tend to bring anyways with their plethora of miniatures. This is also going to be a campaign-based game, and of course, you know, this is Fantasy Flight, so you can expect there to be a lot of expansions going forward. Now, they say that they have reinterpreted all of the old gameplay mechanisms and have breathed new life into it by carrying them out or executing them in different ways, and I'm interested to see if there will be improvements or lateral moves, or maybe even downgrades. We will see. But I am very open-minded about this because I'm a big fan of Descent, and I know that that's it. They've moved on from the second edition, and they're not going to, produce any more, content for that. So I'm going to look into third edition, purchase it, give it a try, and at least see what it has to offer. My number 2 most anticipated board game of 2021 release, Descent Legends in the Dark. And finally, we make it to my top 1, my number 1 most anticipated board game of 2021. Wait for it. It's Batman, the animated series, Shadow of the Bat. And this is another Batman-themed game within this top 15. We've seen some themes repeated, like pirate theme, Egyptian theme. Now we've got the Batman comics theme. This is designed by Kevin Wilson and Pete Walsh and published by IDW Games. Very important for people to know, this is from the same system as the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shadows of the Past board game, which was moderately successful for IDW. And as a matter of fact, this game here, Batman Shadow of the Bat, will integrate with that game. So you can combine the content, mix and match characters and baddies and what have you in order to make alternate games and alternate scenarios, right? There was some comic books and even animated films where the two crossed over, right? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Batman, of course, and they worked together. So that sounds really interesting. Now, all the stories, the scenarios, the artwork, the graphic design, and the idea behind the molds in the miniatures are all based on the animated series from the early 1990s. And I was a huge fan of the animated series of Batman, and I might be dating myself by saying so, but I proudly proclaim it. I really enjoyed that series. I do think it's one of the greatest, if not the greatest, animated series as far as a comic book superhero is concerned. And I'm so excited that somebody's actually designing a game based on that. Now, I do understand that there was a Batman Gotham City Under Siege game by IDW that came out a few years ago, also by Kevin Wilson, but that was a much smaller scale game and didn't really catch my interest and hasn't really done so well for IDW itself. But this game, a big, massive type of game, this is a cooperative, fully cooperative, I believe fully cooperative, dungeon crawler style game with the Batman IP. Really, really neat. Now, one of the cool things about this game is that it has this neat dice sharing system where players all have their own unique customized dice based on their characters, but they can share one dice with a person or a teammate along the way. If it's not useful for them and they figure it might be more useful for someone else, they can do that. Now, the main reason why this is rocketed to #1 on my most anticipated list of board games coming out in 2021 is because this is my first ever Kickstarter, guys. This is the first project I've backed on Kickstarter in over 4 years of being in the hobby. I saw this and I could not resist, and I went for the maximum bundle, threw all the chips on the table, bet the house on this game. I'm going to be getting so much content. As a matter of fact, I hope sometime maybe in the next couple weeks to months, this game will be coming in and I'll be able to unbox it and share it with you guys here on the channel. But that's my #1 most anticipated board game of 2021, Batman the Animated Series, Shadow of the Bat. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Consider clicking on one of the videos that you see on the screen right now. If YouTube is showing them to you, it's because they think there's a really good chance that you will like one of them. Also, check in the description down below for a link to my Patreon and see how you can support this channel and become more involved in the behind-the-scenes process. Research and find a tier that works for you. This is Harry saying take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have fun gaming. Bye-bye.